Sirens screamed through downtown, as screens flickered with breaking banners that felt like alarms in the veins. Evelyn Hart said, "This is a mistake," while cameras pressed closer like teeth. The courthouse steps trembled under a stampede of lenses and shouts that braided into panic. Detective Alex Rivera said, "Miss Hart, keep your head down," and his jaw locked against the roar. Daniel Price said, "Stay behind me," but his certainty frayed like old silk. Reporters hurled questions, dressed as verdicts, and each word snapped like a trap. A gavel cracked from inside, and the corridor spat out gasps that cut the air. Evelyn said, "I can explain," though the sentence sounded like a plea swallowed by thunder. Nia Torres whispered, "Don't talk here," and her hand steadied a future already on fire. A headline flashed across every phone, and the city seemed to lean in, hungry for the fall. The networks synchronized like a single heartbeat and pumped the story into every living room. Lila Grant said, "We are following a developing scandal." And the teleprompter marched like a drum. Archival clips cut through the feed, a golden past flashing over a tarnished present. Evelyn Hart said, "Not on air, somewhere off camera, already losing control of her name." Daniel Price said, "We will make a statement," but the storm wrote its own script. Call-ins jammed lines, and every host polished outrage into a mirror for ratings. A producer shouted cues that sounded like orders in a war room. Nia Torres said, "Stop scrolling," but the scroll had become a dissent. The panel debated guilt and innocence, while the facts lagged behind the flames. By sundown, the scandal felt less like news and more like gravity. Outside the courthouse, the sidewalk buckled under the weight of eyes and hopes and envy. Evelyn Hart said, "I want run," and the words sounded brave, but shoes stuck in fear. Paparazzi formed a thicket that rustled with whispers bent into knives. Alex Rivera said, "We go on my count," and the swarm twitched like a living net. A chant rose, part pity, part rage, and it shook loose the last comfort of anonymity. Daniel Price said, eyes front, and tried to give her a tunnel through the storm. A lens fogged and cleared, catching a raw flicker of doubt like a secret sunrise. Nia Torres said, "I'm here," and the promise tightened the air. The door opened and the crowd inhaled as one organism. The flash hit, and time shattered into shards of accusation. Then the leak landed like a hammer tossed through stained glass. And the room inhaled sharp. A grainy audio clip spread, her voice rising, breaking, pleading in a way that burned. Evelyn Hart said, "Please listen." And the line bled into static that felt like judgment. Lila Grant said, "This alleged recording changes the stakes," and the panel leaned closer. Daniel Price said, "That audio is manipulated," but his certainty bent at the edges. Threads of context snapped, leaving fragments that invited the worst assumptions. Alex Rivera said, "We cannot comment on evidence," and the official silence boomed. Nia Torres said, "They will never play the full call," and her eyes went glassy. The internet took the shards and built a blade. The blade turned toward Evelyn, and the echo would not stop. By morning, one sentence crawled out of the chaos and stood upright like a verdict. A finance graphic flashed across screens and names lined up like dominoes with quiet menace. Lila Grant said, "Investigators are linking the actress to funds tied to a charity under review." Evelyn Hart said, "That's not possible," and her voice fell into a well with no echo. Alex Rivera said, "We will present our findings," and the promise carried a chill. Daniel Price said, "We will sue for defamation, but the markets do not fear lawsuits." Nia Torres said, "Tell them the truth," and the words trembled like a bridge. Threads tightened into a rope that pulled at her legacy until it creaked. The city woke to the taste of scandal and coffee. The shock was complete, and the true crime began to show its teeth. Long before headlines tore her apart, Evelyn Hart was the dazzling newcomer who arrived in Hollywood with a suitcase and a dream. She said, "This city will remember me," as neon lights painted promises on her face. She worked nights in cramped cafes, rehearsing lines to walls that gave no applause. Daniel Price said, "You've got something rare. when he first spotted her at an audition where others failed. A casting director smirked, but handed her the script that would change her life. On set, the lights embraced her like a crown, and the camera captured not just beauty but hunger. Mia Torres said, "You'll be unstoppable," while folding gowns and wiping tears after long shoots. Evelyn smiled because she believed it, because for a moment the world bent in her favor. Every photo, every cheer made her glow brighter, but already, shadows stretched behind her. The red carpet became her battlefield, and her throne. Flashbulbs fired like fireworks, and Evelyn Hart said, "This is mine," while gripping a golden statuette with trembling hands. Daniel Price whispered, "Smile wider," as the press clamored, each question another spark. She twirled in gowns worth fortunes, each seam stitched with envy. Lila Grant said on air, "She is Hollywood's crown jewel," and millions at home believed it. Yet, Evelyn's gaze sometimes drifted, as though searching for a window out of the glare. Mia Torres murmured, "Breathe, it's just another night," holding her clutch tightly. The music swelled, champagne flowed, and whispers of her perfection echoed. Still, Evelyn thought, will they love me tomorrow if I stumble? Her empire, built on applause, felt firm, but hollow. Fame held her hand, but its grip already tightened like a chain. Behind closed doors the glamour cracked, and the silence felt louder than applause. Evelyn said, "I can't breathe in this house," pacing marble floors that echoed like accusations. The mansion gleamed with trophies and glass, but warmth had fled long ago. Daniel Price said, "Don't say that you're living a dream," but his eyes were cold, already measuring her value. Mia Torres whispered, "You're too tired, you need rest," carrying water she knew Evelyn wouldn't drink. At parties, she laughed louder than she felt, a hollow sound buried under music. Lila Grant narrated her triumphs, unaware of the fractures spreading behind the curtains. Evelyn thought, if they saw me here, they'd never cheer again. In those rooms, beauty felt like a costume too heavy to remove. The public adored her glow, but Evelyn was learning that light always casts a shadow. The whispers of corruption began not in tabloids, but in a signature. Evelyn Hart said, "I just want freedom to choose my roles," as the ink flowed on a contract that chained her future. Daniel Price smiled, "This guarantees your empire," though fine print curled like a trap. A producer grinned, offering champagne, while already counting profits she would never see. Mia Torres frowned. "Are you sure this is right?" But her question vanished in laughter. Evelyn convinced herself it was necessary, that success required surrender. Lila Grant later remarked, "She signed the biggest deal in years, unaware of the cost." That night, Evelyn sat in her dressing room, eyes tracing the signature that felt more like a confession. She whispered, "This will change everything," but could not decide if it was triumph or doom. The seed of betrayal had been planted in ink. The audience adored her, but cracks beneath the glow deepened. Evelyn Hart said, "They don't know the real me," her voice trailing into the makeup mirror. Daniel Price muttered, "They don't need to know, they just need to believe." Cameras followed her everywhere, chasing a version sculpted by others. Mia Torres said, "You've given them too much already," as she fastened earrings Evelyn didn't want to wear. Lila Grant declared on live television, "She defines this generation." But Evelyn stared at her reflection, hollowed by doubt. The applause outside the theater was deafening, but inside her chest, silence grew. Every smile carved a deeper crack in her spirit. She whispered, "If I stop shining, will they still see me?" The first seeds of doom had taken root, hiding under silk and glitter. The rumors no longer hid in whispers, but walked boldly across front pages, bruising Evelyn's image with each headline. She said, "They don't see me anymore. They see a monster," clutching her phone as flashes cut through night. Daniel snapped, "Ignore them. We control this story." But the weight of panic bent his tone. Paparazzi crowded every step, their shouts like bullets ricocheting off glass. Mia whispered, "We should leave the city for a while," her voice fragile yet firm. Evelyn tried to smile for cameras, but the grin cracked like shattered porcelain. Lila reported, Sources close to the star reveal reckless spending and hidden debts, and the world feasted on the scandal. Evelyn thought, my silence is now their weapon, as each article stripped another layer of her. Fame once lifted her, now it dragged her through broken glass, and every breath cut deeper. The photographs were merciless, freezing Evelyn's every falter into eternal proof. She whispered, they want me broken, while stumbling past cameras that pressed closer. Daniel barked, step back, but the mob surged like a tide. Nia held her arm, whispering, just keep walking, though her hand trembled. Headlines screamed, falling star stumbles again, as photos hit feeds before the night was over. Evelyn thought, I can't outpace their hunger, and felt her pulse drum against her throat. The glamour of lights had turned into a cage of fire. Alex Rivera, watching from afar, muttered, it's spiraling, already taking notes for what was coming. Evelyn's face, once perfection, now became a mask of fear, replayed in slow motion across every screen. And with each flash, the illusion cracked deeper, exposing the raw edge of collapse. Friends once loyal now whispered to tabloids for checks signed in betrayal. Achewai, Evelyn said, they sell pieces of me I never gave them. Voice brittle in the dark. Daniel muttered, we'll silence them, but his hands shook as contracts unraveled. Lila announced on television, anonymous sources claim drug binges and violent fights, feeding the fire. Nia whispered, not everyone leaking is lying, her eyes full of sorrow. Evelyn thought, they're building a graveyard out of my secrets, as headlines multiplied. Parties once filled with laughter grew cold, conversations pausing when she entered. The champagne tasted of betrayal. The applause turned to whispers. Evelyn said, I can't tell who's friend or foe anymore, as paranoia coiled around her. Fame was no longer a crown, but a curse stitched from betrayal. The cracks widened as vices bled into daylight. Evelyn said, one drink calms me, two save me, clutching crystal glasses that multiplied like ghosts. Daniel scolded, keep it together, cameras are everywhere, but his voice sounded hollow. Nia pleaded, you don't need this, reaching for the glass that never left Evelyn's hand. Paparazzi caught blurry photos of her staggering, turning them into proof of collapse. Lila narrated, concerns grow over the actress's health, the words polished yet merciless. Evelyn thought, if I don't blur the edges, I'll shatter, as her reflection blurred in mirrors. Friends vanished, deals froze, and once faithful fans turned cold. Each indulgence numbed her, each headline carved her deeper. The city that crowned her now jeered, and Evelyn walked its streets like a ghost wrapped in silk. And then, one night, the phone call came, and nothing was the same again. Evelyn answered, her voice sharp, who is this? But silence answered first. A low voice said, they know everything, and her blood turned to ice. Daniel, pacing, demanded, what did they say? But she couldn't repeat it. Nia whispered, it's over, isn't it? Tears welling before truth was spoken. Evelyn thought, my empire has just collapsed with a sentence as her hands shook violently. Outside, the city lights blinked indifferent to her fall. Lila's broadcast interrupted regular programming, teasing a story darker than scandal. Evelyn's heart pounded like war drums, each beat tearing away hope. That call became the locked door behind her, slamming shut, leaving no path back. The descent had now begun. The investigation tore through her carefully built facade like fire devouring paper. Detective Alex Rivera said, follow the money, the truth is there, his tone carved from steel. Evelyn Hart whispered, it's not what it looks like, but her voice quivered with guilt. Daniel Price barked, they'll never prove it, pacing like a trapped wolf. Documents surfaced, showing charity funds redirected into shell accounts. Lila Grant reported, authorities have uncovered suspicious transfers, and the nation gasped. Nia Torres whispered, I told you this would catch us, her eyes wet with dread. Evelyn thought, every dollar screams betrayal, as her empire turned to ash. She once dreamed her name would shine forever. Now it glittered only in headlines etched with disgrace. The twist hit harder than scandal, ripping the mask away. Evelyn said, I trusted him when evidence tied Daniel Price to offshore fraud. Daniel sneered. You signed the papers, not me, shifting blame like smoke. Lila announced on live broadcast. Her closest advisor orchestrated the scheme, and the world reeled. Nia cried, he used you, clinging to Evelyn as cameras pressed harder. Evelyn thought, I built my legacy on his lies, the weight crushing her chest. Alex Rivera said, you're complicit if you stay silent, his eyes unforgiving. The betrayal didn't just scorch her career, it poisoned every bond she once cherished. The empire she thought was hers now belonged to betrayal, and her downfall was written in ink and deceit. Her inner circle splintered into shards, each betrayal sharper than the last. Evelyn whispered, where were you when I needed loyalty? Her voice cracking. Nia said, I never left you, but you never listened, guilt weighing her. Daniel smirked. This is survival, not loyalty, and walked away. Lila narrated, her allies turn against her, fueling the blaze for millions to watch. Evelyn thought, I am alone in a war I never wanted, and the truth hollowed her chest. Alex Rivera pressed, you can come clean now, or drown in silence, his tone final. The mansion that once echoed with laughter now groaned with emptiness. Every friendship had a price, and Evelyn was discovering hers was higher than she could pay. The betrayal sharpened when Daniel's private recordings leaked. Evelyn said, you recorded me? Her voice breaking into rage. Daniel replied, insurance, Evelyn. You never know who's watching. Nia gasped, you destroyed her, voice trembling. Lila announced on broadcast, secret tapes reveal shocking confessions, and the world tilted. Evelyn thought, my voice is now their evidence, as headlines played her words like weapons. Alex Rivera said, the truth is uglier than I imagined, his eyes dark with resolve. The glamorous star was stripped naked by betrayal, her legacy bleeding in stereo. Evelyn once feared scandal, now she faced annihilation. And every voice that once praised her now pierced like a blade. By the end of the week, no one doubted the scandal was only the surface. Evelyn said, it was never about fame, it was about survival, her voice hollow. Alex Rivera replied, survival doesn't excuse crime, his stare cutting. Nia whispered, you can still fight for truth, though hope shook in her words. Daniel laughed, the game is over, vanishing into shadows he created. Lila closed her segment with, this story is darker than anyone imagined, leaving viewers stunned. Evelyn thought, I built an empire of glass, and now every shard cuts me. The twist revealed that her world wasn't glamorous but dangerous, laced with fraud, betrayal, and blood-stained secrets. What once was stardom was now a battlefield, and the war had only just begun. The courthouse swarmed with cameras, each flash like a blade cutting away the last of Evelyn's dignity. She whispered, they want blood, as she stepped from the black SUV into a sea of reporters. Daniel said, stay calm, this is just the beginning, but his voice trembled. Alex Rivera muttered, we've built this case brick by brick, as he guided her forward. Nia clung to her arm whispering, don't look at them, just breathe. Lila narrated from the steps, the star once adored by millions now walks into the trial that may end her freedom. Evelyn thought, this is not my life, this is their stage, as questions flew like arrows. The air was heavy, suffocating, as though the city itself demanded her fall. The arrest was spectacle. The trial would be crucifixion. The courtroom air felt colder than stone, every whisper echoing like judgment. Evelyn sat at the defense table whispering, they've already decided, her eyes hollow. Daniel leaned in, we can still fight, though sweat betrayed his fear. Alex Rivera stood at the prosecutor's table, voice sharp, this case is about deception, fraud, and betrayal. Nia whispered, you're stronger than this, but her tears glistened. Lila's report streamed live, the star faces charges that could destroy her career forever. Evelyn thought, the cameras are not here for truth, they are here for blood. Each testimony, each glare, carved another wound. The trial was not a search for justice, but a theater of ruin, and Evelyn was both actor and sacrifice. Witnesses paraded like ghosts from Evelyn's past, each testimony cutting deeper. A former friend said she knew everything, voice dripping with betrayal. Evelyn whispered, "That's a lie," but no one listened. Alex Rivera pressed, these were not mistakes, they were choices, every word landing like a hammer. Daniel growled, objection, but the damage lingered. Lila narrated live, the evidence piles higher, painting a damning picture of the star once idolized. Mia whispered, they're twisting it, clutching Evelyn's hand tightly. Evelyn thought, every secret I buried has come alive, as faces turned cold. The truth and the lies merged until neither could be separated, and all of it clung to her like chains. The deepest wound came not from enemies but from betrayal closest to her heart. Mia whispered, I have to tell the truth, as tears streaked her face. Evelyn gasped, not you too, her world crumbling. Alex Rivera said, the witness has crucial testimony, and silence choked the room. Daniel muttered, this will destroy us, as his hands shook. Lila reported, her longtime assistant takes the stand, a shocking turn in the trial. Evelyn thought, I raised her voice, and now it buries me, her soul hollowing. Mia said, I loved her, but I cannot lie anymore. And the jury leaned forward. It wasn't the prosecutors who shattered Evelyn's armor, it was the one she trusted most. Betrayal had a name, and it was spoken with sorrow. The verdict arrived like thunder rolling across the city. Evelyn whispered, please, not guilty, but the words barely escaped. The woman said guilty, and the courtroom exhaled like a storm breaking. Daniel closed his eyes, whispering, it's over. Mia sobbed, I'm sorry, her hands trembling. Alex Rivera said, justice has spoken, his face unreadable. Lila announced live, the verdict seals her downfall, but this story is far from over. Evelyn thought, this is not the end, it is the beginning of my ruin, as her shoulders collapsed. The gavel struck, final and merciless, echoing louder than applause ever had. Fame had crowned her, now it condemned her. Her empire shattered, and she sat in the ruins, stripped of every illusion. The mansion that once roared with laughter now sat silent, echoing with emptiness. Evelyn whispered, this house is a tomb, her voice lost in the hollow rooms. Dust gathered on trophies that once gleamed like suns. Daniel muttered, everything we built is gone, though his bitterness carried no comfort. Mia said, I can't stay here anymore, her hands trembling as she gathered her things. The pool lay untouched, a stagnant mirror of forgotten luxury. Lila's broadcast echoed faintly from the television, her empire crumbles, her fans turn away. Evelyn thought, they don't cheer, they don't hate, they don't care, and the silence was worse than jeers. Fame had left her behind, and all that remained was the ruin of what she had once called home. The world's attention shifted, leaving Evelyn stranded in quiet exile. She said, they've moved on to the next scandal, scrolling headlines that no longer carried her name. Daniel replied, oblivion is worse than hatred, bitterness sharp in his tone. Mia murmured, at least you can breathe now, though her eyes betrayed doubt. Lila narrated over archived footage, once the brightest star, now vanished into silence. Evelyn thought, I was addicted to their gaze, realizing the emptiness of anonymity. The cameras no longer chased her, the crowds no longer screamed. She was alone, unseen, unheard, left to wander through the ruins of her fame. Attempts at redemption were fragile whispers against roaring judgment. Evelyn said, maybe if I tell my side, they'll listen, staring into a blank camera in her living room. Daniel scoffed, no one believes confessions, only spectacle. Mia pleaded, tell them the truth anyway, her voice trembling with loyalty. Lila remarked on air, her attempts to explain come too late, with clinical detachment. Evelyn thought, even my honesty feels like a lie, as words caught in her throat. The world she once commanded with a smile now turned away from her every plea. Redemption slipped through her fingers like smoke, leaving only silence in its wake. In the quiet exile, Evelyn began plotting what came next. She whispered, "They took everything, but I'm not done." Her voice sharpened with resolve. Daniel asked, "Revenge?" His smirk bitter. Nia said, "Or survival?" Her tone filled with fragile hope. Evelyn thought, "If I cannot rise again, I will make them feel my fall." Lila narrated, "Sources suggest she is planning a return, though whispers remain unconfirmed." The silence of obscurity hardened her edges, transforming grief into cold steel. Every memory of betrayal became fuel, every scar a map. She was no longer a star but a storm waiting for her moment to strike. The cost of fame revealed itself in full, not in headlines but in absence. Evelyn whispered, "They cheered when I rose, they watched when I fell, and now they forget me." Daniel muttered, "That's the way it's always been," his eyes empty. Nia cried softly, "You were more than this," but the words felt like farewell. Lila signed off one of her final broadcasts on the case. Her story is a cautionary tale of beauty, power, and ruin. Evelyn thought, "I gave them everything, and they left me with nothing." The lights had gone out, the applause had died, and all that remained was the echo of a legacy built on fragile glass. Evelyn sat in a quiet room, her reflection fractured by the cracked mirror before her. She whispered, "I am still here," though her voice trembled with doubt. The world had turned away, yet she remained a ghost of glory past. Nia said softly, "You are not gone, only forgotten," her words carrying fragile hope. Daniel muttered, "Hope doesn't pay the price," his bitterness deep as scars. Lila's voice echoed from an old broadcast, "Her downfall will be remembered forever." Evelyn thought, "I wanted immortality, but I only bought infamy." Silence pressed close, heavy and endless, reminding her that survival was not victory. The public's judgment was harsher than any verdict. Evelyn whispered, "They don't forgive. They erase," scrolling through silence where her name once blazed. Nia said, "Maybe time will heal," though she doubted her own words. Daniel muttered, "Time only buries deeper," his voice hollow. Lila narrated in a retrospective, her story stands as both warning and spectacle. Evelyn thought, "To them I am already gone, erased from the stage I built." Applause had turned to silence, love to apathy, and her legacy into a ghost of headlines. But secrets never stayed buried. Evelyn received a letter slipped under her door. She whispered, "What is this?" her hands trembling. Inside were documents hinting at conspiracies greater than her own crimes. Daniel smirked. "Seems the story isn't finished," his eyes sharp with calculation. Nia gasped, "Don't go back into this," her plea desperate. Evelyn thought, "The world thinks my story is over, but they don't know the truth." Lila's voice echoed in memory, "There is always another chapter hidden in the dark." And Evelyn felt the faintest spark of dangerous purpose. Disappearance followed revelation. Evelyn walked out of the courthouse after her last appeal, silent as stone. Reporters shouted, but she gave no words, no glance. Nia whispered, "Where will you go?" Yet Evelyn only walked faster. Daniel muttered, "She'll vanish and the world will forget again," his tone unreadable. Lila's segment aired, "This may be the last time the world sees Evelyn Hart." Evelyn thought, "Let them believe I am gone," as she stepped into the waiting car. The door shut with finality, like the closing of a coffin. The final blow echoed not in headlines but in silence. Evelyn whispered, "In the end, I wasn't destroyed by them, I was destroyed by myself." Nia cried, "Don't say that," but her protest dissolved. Daniel said coldly, "Truth at last." Lila's final retrospective intoned, "Her story haunts not because of what was revealed, but because of what may never be known." Evelyn thought, "The world will never hear the last chapter." Then silence filled the screen, haunting and unending, leaving only the echo of her ruin.